everyone, it's Sammy from Sammy's Sweet Life, and today I want to talk about a strange topic. This is a topic I never thought that I would be discussing on here, but it is about renting versus home ownership. So we have done both in the past. We currently own this home. We live in Austin, Texas, so the real estate market here is just insane. The housing prices are totally inflated. This is our second house that we've owned, and it's almost double the price of our house in Champaign. And so yes, it is bigger. It does have more bedrooms. It has more bathrooms. It's something that we have really felt this last year of living here. And so this isn't the right fit. It's not the dream home. We're not loving the area, all these things. And we've looked into whether we're going to buy in another area, pay a still really inflated price, or if we're going to rent. And I think we're leaning more towards renting. So I wanted to talk to you about this because this is honestly just something I never considered as a long-term solution. And it may not be our long-term solution. It might be like a semi-long-term solution, a medium-length solution for us. But when we moved to Austin at first, we were planning on building a house. We rented for a year, and it was a very temporary thing. We weren't planning on renting long-term. It was just to get us from house A to house B. And this time we're thinking we're going to rent. And a lot of things have gone into this search, and it's been a really eye-opening experience. It's totally going against that American dream aspect where your house is a really good investment and you make money when you sell your house. To be honest, if Johnny's job did not relocate us the first time, we would have lost money selling our other house. We would have given money at closing to get rid of our house, which is just totally absurd. And so that was kind of an eye-opening experience. And then just looking into the payment and looking into this experience more has really opened up my eyes about the benefits of renting versus the benefits of home ownership. Technically, the bank owns our house right now. We're paying the bank because we don't own this house outright. We have a mortgage, we're paying the bank. But let's say, for argument's sake, we owned this house. So yes, we own the house, but so does the government. We pay property taxes. So we would still basically be paying $1,000 a month in property taxes here because the property taxes here are insane, just like the housing market's insane. So we pay close to $1,000 in just property tax. So we are paying that every month, whether we have a mortgage or we don't have a mortgage. So when I'm looking at the breakdown of our mortgage payment, the smallest fraction of the mortgage payment is going towards the principal on the loan. We pay less than $500 towards our house, but the majority of our payment is not going towards us owning this house. We're paying the bank, we're paying the property taxes. So with that in mind, the whole argument, or the main argument that people have for owning versus renting is if you are renting, you're throwing away money every month. And of that payment that we're paying, so our whole payment is not cheap, but only a fraction of that, $500 of that, is not being thrown away every month. Versus if we rented something, we could rent something that's $500 cheaper and we'd be in the same exact place and we wouldn't have so much money wrapped up into our house. Yes, we'd be throwing away, X number of dollars every month, but we're doing that now owning the house. And now we have all the liabilities associated with owning a house. So for one thing, we've got a lot of money wrapped up into this house in equity. That's money we can't touch unless we get like a second mortgage or something, which is something I hope we would never do. But that's a lot of money just wrapped up into the house that's not easily accessible. How you get that money is you take out a loan, which is kind of scary, or you have to sell your house, which is you're at the whims of people who are buying houses. So that's something to consider, is all that money's wrapped up in the house, and the longer you live in the house, the more money is wrapped up into the house. Over time, the amount that goes towards principal changes, but the average homeowner in this area only owns their home 7 years. So that's a lot of people owning their home outright and living in it forever. And then that's also a lot of people who move in a year or 2 or 3 and go and sell their house. So the average is 7 years. That's nowhere near the 15 or the 30 year. That's nowhere near how long these terms are for the mortgage rates. So when you're only living in a house on average 7 years, you're mostly paying the bank and you're mostly paying the property tax if you live in an area that has such high property taxes like we do. So it's just not so beneficial to own a house. There are conveniences about owning houses, and there's also a lot of liabilities and a lot of drawbacks to owning houses. One argument I had for living in a house is you have stability. We're not at the mercy of a landlord, but if you think about it, we're at the mercy of my husband's work, my husband's job. If he were to get laid off, we'd be selling this house as soon as humanly possible. And if he got laid off when we were renting, it would be a whole lot less of a burden. You can sublet, so it really won't cost you anything, or you can just take the penalty, whatever the penalty is for getting out of your lease early. Sometimes it's like a month or 2 months rent that you have to pay to get rid of it. So that's just a whole lot cheaper than having to go through the process of selling your house. It's a whole lot less stressful. Luckily, we do have an emergency fund. We have so many months worth of savings at, our current lifestyle set aside in the bank account. So we can access that and we don't have to worry. It's not a really dire situation the second he would get laid off. Knock on wood that will never happen, but we were really close to that. We thought for sure he was getting laid off when the office closed there. And we're so incredibly lucky that he did get to relocate. But that kind of stuff happens. We're not immune to that. Nobody's really immune to that. That's a much smaller risk if you're renting versus if you own the house. One of my biggest arguments still to this day is I have the stability where my children are going to be in the same house. But again, that's at the mercy of his job. If we're renting, that's at the mercy of the landlord. So hopefully we could be in a position, or other people could be in the position, to where they find a long-term rental. So it's somebody who doesn't plan on selling their house anytime soon. Of course, they can change their mind, but you can definitely lock into a multi-year lease, so you don't have to worry about going through the process every year of, are we going to be able to stay, or are they going to try to sell the house that we're renting? I can see that being really stressful, and that's one of my reasons that I want to buy, so I don't have to worry about that little added stress. But when I'm looking at the money, and I've always thought, renting is just throwing away money every month. Owning a house is mostly throwing away money in our particular circumstance. I'm thinking if we take that money that's not being thrown away, hopefully the part that's going towards your principal, you will get back when you sell. But let's say hypothetically, we take that $500 and get a $500 cheaper rental. So we have $500 in cash versus $500 being thrown into our house and being kind of locked away until we sell the house. We take that, we put it in some sort of high yielding interest investments. We could make a lot of money off of that $500. So housing prices can be volatile. You hopefully will make money on your house over the long term, but you've got to think of how much you're throwing into the house via maintenance, how much you put into the payments every month that is just thrown away. And I don't think in most markets the houses will appreciate that much. So let's say you put in a new roof and you had to pay for it outright over time, which most people will have to do. If they own a house more than 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to have to replace a roof. Hopefully insurance can pay for some of that if your roof actually gets damaged in a hailstorm or something and you really luck out. But most of the time, if you live in a house long term, you're going to buy a roof. That's 10 grand right there. Are you going to get that 10 grand back when you go and sell the house? So there are all these expenses similar to that: water heaters, air conditioning units, various maintenance things that have to be done to a house. You're not going to see all that money back, whether you rent and throw away the rent payment every month, or you own a house but you're dumping money into the house. You won't see all that money back most of the time. In some markets, maybe like here, the houses do appreciate really fast and you can see a return on your investment, but I think by and large, you don't. You don't see that money back. And if you rent for 10 years, you're not gonna throw that extra 10 grand in to replace the roof or, whatever goes wrong. I'm not entirely convinced that renting is like the best financial option for everybody, because it definitely isn't. There's a lot of positive things to go with your house. You can make it exactly how you want. You can paint, do whatever you want to the inside of your house, completely gut the kitchen and redo it. But with our very limited experiences of dealing with handymen and general contractors and trying to get anything done in the house, it has been a nightmare. It's just been really hard. We have not found anybody remotely reliable. I've gone through so many people. It's been a really stressful process to have people in and out of your house trying to get things fixed and get things done. And I would be scared to gut a kitchen based on the experiences we've had in the past. So it's not something that I would look forward to doing to the house. So if we were to go buy, we're probably not going to change a whole lot based on the experiences we've had. I've had a couple of people in here give me quotes for redoing our kitchen. It's something I haven't really talked about on this channel because I can't get anybody with a reasonable price to actually come and do the job. So we were planning on redoing the cabinets, having them refaced, and some of the quotes are like $20,000 and some of the quotes are more reasonable, and I can't get the people to come do the work. So it's things like that, like, yeah, I want a new kitchen. I want to be able to have the kitchen done, and I can't find people who will do it, people that I can trust to do it. So that's been a really big thing. So just because I have a kitchen that I can fix doesn't mean it's easy to get it done. Let's say we took $10,000 and redid the kitchen, just changed a couple of things and made it look a little bit nicer. If we go to sell the house, will we get that 10 grand back? I don't know. So it's just one of those things that you just never know with buying a house, if it's gonna pay off in the long run. And most likely it's probably not. Let's do another hypothetical. Let's say you live in your house for 20 years and then you go to sell it. Yes, you're gonna make money on it, and 20 years it's gonna appreciate, but how much money did you dump into the house? Are you getting back that full monthly payment that you paid? Let's say you pay like $1,500 a month for 20 years. Did your price go up that much? And in that 20 years, how much maintenance did you do to the house? And take that tally up. I don't think you made money. I think you got your own money back. And hopefully, if you're lucky, you get all of your own money back. But you're not making money. You're getting your money back. And so it's a hard thing to wrap your mind around because we're told you have to own a house. That's the way to prove that you're successful. That's the way to make money over the long term. You're gonna put the money into this house. It's a really good investment. You're gonna make money when you go to sell it, and everything's gonna be perfect. That's just probably not the reality for most of us, especially us selling this house really soon. We are in a really good market that our home value has already gone up in the year that we've lived here, but we're still not making money because we're going to have to pay realtor fees. So that's 6% right off the top. Your home value has to appreciate by at least 6% just to break even. And that's not considering the payments that we have put into it each month too. So that's money that we've paid for the interest and for the property taxes that we'll never see again because we're gonna pay these high transaction costs to just get rid of the house. So if we're lucky, we'll close to break even though our house value has gone up significantly in the year. Based on the research and the numbers that I've looked at, I'm just thinking it's a myth. The homeownership, American dream is a myth. When I look at it from month to month, is our house value going up a couple grand every month to really truly even out the money that we're putting into this house? And I don't think it is, and I don't think it will be even if we wait 10 years to sell the house. I really feel like it's an eye-opening exercise to look at your payment, look at how much is going towards the mortgage. If you look at the financial people, Dave Ramsey says don't have a mortgage, but most people cannot afford to buy a house outright, especially like in a market where we're in. We will never be able to afford a decent house in a decent area with decent schools in this town. We just won't. The houses here in the more decent areas start at $350 and they go up from there. I definitely in this house feel the burden of the house, kind of, just based on the payment, just based on are we going to be able to sell it. We did buy in a community where people build, so I think most people in this area when they're coming to move here, they want to build a house, and so that's kind of at a disadvantage for us going to sell this house since our neighborhood is still growing. And those are things we didn't think about at the time. But those are all things to consider when you're thinking about, buying this house as a profit-making thing, as a good investment. It's probably not. There's probably better things you can do with your money. Just hypothetically looking at the numbers between how much we're paying now and how much we would pay to rent, we could rent something that's $500 less. Our homeowner's insurance is like $100 something a month, and our renter's insurance on the other hand was $11 a month, so that's like $100 savings right there. So that's easily $600 we would save. In the renting situation, to get it to be $500 cheaper, yes, the house would be smaller, so we would have a smaller house to be able to offset that $500, and so we could take that what is now $600 if you include the homeowner's insurance versus renter's insurance savings. We could take that $600, invest it in high yielding accounts, and make money that way a whole lot easier with less liability and less risk than throwing it all into a house that may or may not grow in value. There are recessions every once in a while, every so many years, and that means you're not going to make money on your house if you need to sell it in those kind of years. These are all just thoughts that kind of go into the decision-making process for us, and I think we're going to rent. And I'm not going to lie, the Minimalist podcast has changed my life here, because I never in a million years would have thought I would go into renting something else thinking it would be a semi-long-term solution. Honestly, we don't know if we want to stay in Austin long-term, so that's another thing to consider. We thought we would go from buying this house to buying a different house in the different area that we're considering living in that'll make Johnny's commute so much nicer. But if we go to buying the other house, we're still in the same situation of if something happens to his job, we're a little bit screwed. If something happens to the economy, we're somewhat screwed. So we have all these different factors playing into it. And after the building fiasco, I've learned a whole lot about houses, and especially houses in this area where it is a booming area. They're throwing up the houses so quickly. They're being to code, but they're not always to code, and things go wrong and people buy these houses that have massive, massive problems, and they can't sell the house and they lose money, and sometimes they have to walk away from the house. And these are, rare circumstances. Now I'm getting kind of rambly. These are kind of rare circumstances, but I'm kind of terrified of that. After having the experience of building the house that ended up having crazy things happen around that we don't have to discuss because we've discussed that ad nauseum, but it's been eye-opening learning all the things, especially talking to our attorney about other situations in this same area that have had just crazy things happen. It's just something that has really played a key factor in our decision to probably not buy here. And if we were to buy here, we would buy a much older house. And buying a much older house has its own set of circumstances where things need to be replaced and fixed and renovated and all that. And that's a challenge all on its own. Definitely rambled in this video, but I urge you to consider, if you're currently renting and you're probably saving to buy a house, I would urge you to reconsider and think where your money could be best used. And it also really depends on your market. In some markets, it's way, way, way more expensive to rent than it is to buy a house and get a mortgage. And in some places like ours, it's pretty much split. You can find cheaper rentals in a lot of places because people buy here for investment properties. They'll pay cash for a house and get the rent from the house for years and years and make money that way. We see that a lot in this area because it is such a growing area. There are a lot of rental options, and I would say probably better rental options than buying options in certain areas. So it really depends on where you live, which option is best for you financially. I think financially, we will be ahead if we rent for a long time. The main thing I could see that would get in our way if we're gonna take this long-term or semi-long-term rental idea is if we end up with like landlord after landlord that only gives us a year term and goes to sell the house. So if that happens to us a couple of times and we get burned a couple of times and we're gonna have to scramble to move at the end of our lease a couple of times, I could see us going back to buying and being like, we don't care how much it costs. It's better to not have to move every year or whatever. That's my fear going into the renting. If we get a landlord that's somewhat decent and that will also let us stay there long term, I can see us renting for the whole time that we're in Austin potentially. So that's something that we're just really looking into and considering at this point in time. It's honestly something I just never even considered as an option before I listened to the Minimalist podcast and before Johnny really started looking into this kind of the myth of the American dream or the myth of home ownership. Johnny started really first thinking about it when we sold the other house and the fact that we probably would have lost money selling that house. And technically we probably did. We did not get back like every month's worth of payment in the end. So it didn't appreciate in value very much in the couple of years we lived there. I want to say we had our house for 3 years there, or right about 3 years. So our house value didn't appreciate at all in those 3 years. And so all that money that we dumped into the house, we didn't see that money back. I think we basically got our down payment back and that was pretty much it. I know that I didn't give out like real numbers and real scenarios, but if you play around with your own numbers and look at what you could do with investing some of the money versus throwing it into a house you might come out ahead one way or the other, and it might be a clearer answer for you. If we weren't so interested in getting out of this area, we probably would try to stay in this house as long as we can. It was just such a weird set of circumstances regarding how we bought this house. So we do have regrets about buying this house. We were under a whole lot of stress with the other house situation, and I don't think we were thinking very clearly. I rambled so long that my camera got too hot, but I just hope that this will give you some things to think about when you go to purchase your next house or you go to move. I don't know if this video is necessarily very helpful for people who are already in a home ownership situation, but it might give you food for thought for making your next home purchase. I would love to hear from you guys about this. It's just a topic that's been on my mind a lot since we're interested in selling this house soon. So I would love to hear from you guys. Why, if you rent, why do you rent? If you bought, why did you buy? If you're saving to buy in the future, why do you want to do that versus renting? It just seems like so much of the thoughts around home ownership are the same thoughts I still have, kind of ingrained in us. Home ownership is the American dream. Home ownership proves you're successful. Home ownership is a great investment. You will make money if you own a home, when you go to sell it. Another thing I just thought about, like when the market goes up and your house goes up, so do all the other houses you're going to buy. So you're still going to have to live somewhere, whether you make money on your house and throw it into the next house, or you make money into your house and rent and then throw money away renting every month. There's a whole lot around this American dream that's not so accurate. So I would love to know your thoughts on the subject. As a previous renter and two-time home buyer, I really like the idea of renting. I really like that idea of having that freedom to, if you want to move, you can move. Like in this situation, it's a much bigger deal to move because we bought the house, and had we rented over here for a year, we would have realized really quickly we didn't want to live over here and we didn't want to buy a house. But you kind of don't know until you're in that specific area if you're going to like it or not. We definitely made a mistake on that aspect, but we bought a house, so it makes it a little tricky to rectify the mistake. But anyway, I rambled enough. I hope you guys are well. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you liked this topic. It is more of a financial topic. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.